Let's go.
Welcome to the Trusted Leader Show. I'm your host, David Horsager. Join me as I sit down with influential leaders from around the world to discuss why leaders and organizations fail, top tactics for high performance, and how you can become an even more trusted leader.
Welcome to the Trusted Leader Show. I'm Ken Svensson, producer of the Trusted Leader Show. And for this week's episode, we feature an exclusive clip from the 2022 Trusted Leader Summit, where David welcomed to the stage Dave Sparkman, former SVP of Culture at UnitedHealth Group, founder of Spark Your Culture, and executive director for Crossroads Career, to discuss why you need a values lens to align your culture. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
We can all agree in this room that trust is very important, culture is very important, but how many of you have a boss or a colleague who, in my words, I just say that they don't get it. They just don't get it. Anybody work with people like that? None of you. Oh. I worked with a lot of people like that at UnitedHealth Group. They would say, oh, I believe in the core values, but then their actions didn't line up with their words, right? And I'm sure all of you have had that situation. So the question is, how do you shift the thinking? How? See a theme here? I can see the results aren't what we want them to be. I can maybe even identify the behaviors that need to change, but unless I get in and help that person change their thinking, and guess what? Preaching at them doesn't work, folks. They have to arrive at that themselves. They have to have an insight that will enable them to say, that makes a lot of sense for me to want to change. So we're going to get into another exercise that I think going into how do you shift thinking? It's just one illustration that I'm hopeful that you can use in your organization or in your own lives, your own family, to get some different results. So in a moment, I'm going to show you a collage of images on the screen. I'll move you over to here to the side so everyone can see. I'm not going to leave this image on the screen very long, so you need to look as quickly as you can, and I'm going to ask you what you saw. Are you all ready? All right, here we go. Okay. Steve, what was one thing you saw on the screen? A bird. A dove. How many of you saw the dove? Okay, not that many. All right, what was something else? What was something you saw? A sunflower. How many of you saw a sunflower? Okay, a few more. All right. What was something you saw?
Raspberry ice cream.
Oh, specifically, raspberry ice cream. How many of you saw raspberry ice cream? How many of you think Lori's lying? Never know with these games we play. All right, so if we took the time to go to every single person, what are the odds that at least one of you saw every single image on the screen and could tell me what all those images were? 0. Virtually none. All right? Why? Because there's a lot of images on there, and you all have a variety of perspectives. Some of you started on the left, some of you started on the right. You all started in different places. Nothing wrong or right, not being judgmental. There's just probably no way. But what if we did this? If we had the time, and we started with Steve, and we started with the dove. We went to raspberry ice cream. We put the sunflower. We started listing what each table saw. Do you think we could probably accumulate to all of the images on the screen? The probability goes way up when we tap into the wisdom of the team. When we can really gather all of the perspectives that are out there and start to look at it logically and emotionally, Jerry, right? We want to get those together. We may be able to see something and have an insight that we didn't see. Now, we're going to do the exact same exercise for about the same amount of time, so be ready. This time, I want you to look for something yellow. All right, now what did you see? How many of you saw the sunflower? You already had a hint that the sunflower was coming. Okay, what's another, same with a lemon. A lemon, how many of you saw the lemon? Again, if we took the time, the probability goes way up that somebody may have seen all of the yellow items on the screen. Is that fair? How much time would it take if we went around the room before we could accumulate all those images from the team? Not long. Speed goes way up. We may have had to exhaust the audience before, but in this, there's only 6 or 7 on the screen. Wouldn't take that long, right? So speed goes way up. Now, the question is, why did you see something different? Oh, here's the question. How many of you did see something different the second time than the first time? Okay, and why do you think that is? Clarity. Thank you. The first C, clarity. I gave you a hint. I gave you specific instructions on what to look for. And your brain, we learned a little bit about the brain yesterday. I don't even know all those words about reticular or this and that, but it snaps into gear. And you saw yellow. So what would happen if we took this very simple example and we start getting it to be practical in real time? So within UnitedHealth Group, over 300,000 people, billions in revenue, 325,000 employees, how do you get them aligned? It's not as simple as what David did yesterday with the A's or this morning with the flip chart. It's very difficult because every one of those teams, those departments, every one of those business units, every one of the states, even though they're all serving in Medicaid, they can still get very fractured very quickly. So how do you get them aligned? Well, you give them a common filter. You ask them to look at the world in the common way, much like Bobby talked about the 3 values, and we did that for UnitedHealth Group. So we applied a values lens, and I understand that a lot of this writing is very, very small on the screen, but this is the actual result of what one large team put together to be the values lens, the filter by which they wanted to look at their project. This project had failed twice before. Hundreds of millions of dollars wasted. When UnitedHealth Group makes a mistake, it's not a small number. It's a big number. And this was the 3rd time. We had just started our culture journey, and our CEO said, I want to make sure that we embed culture, our values, everywhere. And so that particular team came up with this as their values lens. They said, we want to ask the questions. So as we go forward with a deliverable, does it meet this? Does it pass through the filters? Have we walked in the shoes of the people that we're trying to serve? And a couple times they came to, as they were developing their solutions, they had to come to the answer of, no, we're not. Go back to the drawing board. Keep coming after it. This was their yellow, right? Every one of your organizations has the opportunity to put filters on around your core values, around your principles, around your mission. This gets into how you can do things. When you think about those big, hairy problems, potentially of societal trust, well, how do we shift people's thinking? Well, it's very difficult. We can't go do an arm wrestle exercise with a bunch of people to try to snap them into thinking in a different way. But we can offer suggestions and filters and ask questions in a kind, non-judgmental way. So this, we call it our values lens exercise. Well, how could that potentially, and how does it apply to trust? Well, what would happen if on everything we did, we used the filter of the 8 pillars? When we look at where something is going forward, well, is it clear or is it ambiguous? Will they put faith in us when they care beyond ourselves? The gentleman who accepted the award, I think right over here on the City of Republic, I would bet that as you started talking through these things, it wasn't like everybody just said, oh yeah, that's the way it goes. Or they would have thought of that before. But like many things in life, it's simple, it's not easy. This is not rocket science. And I believe that's why many leaders fail at trust and at culture. Looks simple. Just live the values. But then pressure starts. Results have to be achieved. When you're a Fortune 5 company, quarterly earnings have to be met. And all of a sudden, that pressure starts, and people start demonstrating behaviors that aren't what they would be proud to tell their mom at home. But they don't have to report to their mom at home. And so they do it anyway. because they don't have a lens to start to look at this in the mirror. So if all of us who are grounded in the 8 pillars, we can start using this as filters. And again, I would suggest you do it in the form of questions. You don't come up and, we could all go back to the Trust Edge Leadership Institute booth and we get a little poster and we shove it in people's face saying, oh, you need to live the... No. But if you can ask the questions, if you engage with people and you start to get after this, things start to work. We heard this morning with Cassandra on competency, people who stay fresh. And she had in one of her elements, thought that was very clever, by the way, how she did that. How are we staying fresh? How do you still get rejuvenated? What fuel is coming in to make sure that you're getting fresh output? So the values lens, the 8-pillar lens, I would suggest is a very practical way for us to start to go after problems with trust in my marriage, my kids, my community, even the big hairy ones that we talked about at the start.
We understand the frustration of overspending on training programs without seeing long-term culture change and measurable results. From decades of working with top brands and organizations, we have seen that building a high-performing, high-trust culture is the only way to create a lasting impact. High-trust leaders make the difference between a flavor of the month training initiative and measurable learning and development. Our community of TrustEdge certified partners is equipped with a suite of tools to build a high-performing, high-trust culture where people can perform at their best. So if you want to start solving the root issue in your organization and produce lasting results, head to trustedgeplatform.com to learn more. And now, back to the show.
So, how does trust line up with core values? I would suggest that they're synonymous with core values. Some organizations have trust as a core value. If I went through and took the time to tell you more about each one of the UnitedHealth Group core values, the 5 of them, trust is in every single one of them. And when you look at the overview of all of the core values, an integrated look at core values, they're the underpinning of everything. Otherwise, why would you say them? Right? So when I look at life outside of UnitedHealth Group, which is now for me, and I look at any organizational set of values, I look at the Trust Edge tools as being a key element to helping unlock people to live those out. Now, within Spark Your Culture, the S stands for specifically define. Throughout my time at UnitedHealth Group, even though we had thought we had defined culture, we still got the question all the time, well, what exactly do you mean? What does this word mean or that word mean? And so I, of course, referred to popular culture to get my answer. This year, as I understand it, is the 30th anniversary of the epic film, The Princess Bride. How many of you have seen The Princess Bride? And I heard this illustration made and I thought, boy, this is it. There's a character named Vizzini early on in the movie. And Vizzini keeps using the word inconceivable, actually at the stupidest places. So someone trips and falls and he goes, inconceivable that person fell. And Inigo Montoya, who's another character, goes, that word you keep using, I do not think it means what you think it means. Well, that's what happens with words like culture or words like trust. It will happen with all of your core value words. And until you take the time to get in and specifically define it, you're just going to be talking around themselves. We did an exercise, we don't have the time to go through it now. If you want to have a little fun with your team, ask them what the word bare means. And you'll talk about animals, you'll talk about the cupboards, you'll talk about bare naked, you'll talk about all sorts of things. What they never really get is the word bare aspirin or bare paint. Still the word bare. So when you hear things, they don't always mean what you think they mean. So we want to specifically define it. So we developed at UnitedHealth Group this taxonomy. And our CEO, his fingerprints are all over it. He said, culture, to me, it's the character of the organization. It's not now, some people like to think of it as the spirit of the organization, the ethos, the personality. None of those are bad definitions, but he chose that definition. I love the definition of culture that Ramon brought out yesterday. We didn't choose that definition. Choose whatever you want, but define it. And we said, we're going to define character by our mission and values. And we're going to define that even further to get into what we believe, what we value, and how we will behave. So if you saw our original document, it's not just the word integrity with a little tagline and, okay, let's go home. Our CEO said, if our founding fathers had PowerPoint, the Constitution would still not be a pithy PowerPoint. You have to write out what you mean. And yet, for as strong as that document is, think how many documents have actually lived over 200 years. We still all have different opinions of the Constitution. So we've got to discern that. Principles. We had principles introduced to us, like being here now, being fully present. We talked about accountability. We talk about energy. We talk about recognition and appreciation. All of those things help us live out our values. And then we talked about, of course, being a healthcare company, protocols. All clinicians understand protocols. And so we used our language to talk about, if I want better energy, when I'm on a phone call, I'm going to stand up. Physiologically speaking, I have better energy when I'm standing up than when I'm sitting down. And we didn't develop this library of terms or ideas. It certainly didn't come from memos from Dave sitting at corporate. It developed over time, and we took a lot of people's input along the way, and we kept changing it along the way. But we developed this taxonomy, I call it. Well, you could very easily, assuming you subscribed to my assertion that trust and culture are pretty much one and the same, embedded, integrated together. You put in trust, you put in the 8 pillars, you could have a taxonomy leaving here today to start with. And then you could tailor it however you want, right, to get it going. So, ultimately, it comes down to results. UnitedHealth Group is not a patient company. UnitedHealth Group, being a public company, expected results, and we had the public scrutiny up for those results. So when we first started this journey back in late 2009, someone asked the question of our CEO, Steve Hemsley, well, what do you expect the key performance indicators, the KPIs, to be for culture? And he said, I don't want any specific KPI for just culture. I expect, all those targets I gave you last year, goose them up 25%. Those are the targets you have to hit. I just expect better results. I expect an earnings per share. I expect it in revenue. I expect it in our net promoter score. I expect it in employee engagement. And if those don't go up, that's how we're going to know. And the litmus test of how we'll really know whether culture is working is when I start to hear it from our customers and it's unsolicited. Within 2 years, he was hearing that. And he came back and said, I want to go farther, faster. And that's when it became my full-time job. Up to that point, it was on the side of my desk. And Steve, he goes, well, Dave, what are we going to do to go farther, faster? And I said, I have no idea. And he said, well, you're the full-time guy now. Figure it out. Thanks, Steve. Fun conversation. Away he goes. But the results are what tells the tale. And those results, much like this gentleman mentioned earlier, take some courage. And this story is about a woman named Vivian. And she is in our Medicare space. Medicare serves the older population within our country. And she had 3,000 consumer advocates, customer service representatives, on the phones every day. And Vivian applied exactly what I've talked about today. Now, she didn't come to me and say, Dave, help me figure this out. That actually rarely happened at United. But she was clear. She believed in what she had learned about the results cone. She believed about the values lens, and she said, I'm going to try to apply the values lens, and specifically, I'm going to apply the values lens of compassion to all of my consumer advocates for the month of February. Compassion, Valentine's Day, okay, yeah. She said that in the month of February, I want you to do 5 things, consumer advocates. And one of those 5 things was I want you to handwrite thank you cards to 5 members that you speak to sometime during the month of February. We're not going to give you a script. We're not going to tell you what to say. We will give you pens and paper and stamps. I will clear out all of the obstacles of legal, HR, communications, marketing, who are all worried about what you might say and how you may say it wrong to some member. Cleared out all those obstacles and away they went. Now, I found out about this a couple months after it had happened. So I said, well, Vivian, this is amazing. We got to have lunch. We talked about it. And I said, well, how did it go? She said, and this was like July. She said, Dave, you'll never believe what happened. I thought it would be like twisting arms and we'd have to really beat up on the consumer advocates to get them to do this new task. Because any of you that are associated with call centers recognize that is not good for your KPIs within a call center. You've got to pay all those people to be off the phones, not talking to a member while they write a thank you note. And some of them agonize, like, it's like any of you remember when you're young, you have to write a note to your grandmother for a gift? You agonize, and how do I say thanks for the $5 and keep it coming? I bought a book with the $5, whatever it was. So this took some risk, took some courage on Vivian's part. But she said, Dave, you won't believe it. The results are, here we are in July, so through June, we've written 60,000 thank you notes to members all across the United States. I'm like, wow, that's incredible. What else happened? She goes, well, it's been so successful that we've incorporated this, and other departments now with their call centers are starting to do the same thing. Wow. She said, Dave, what's even more amazing, these members, they're writing thank you notes back for our thank you notes. In fact, some of these members are sending fruit baskets to the call centers. And she gave me one of the thank you notes. So here's one of the thank you notes. Dear Jerry, thank you so much for the thoughtful card you sent me after our recent conversation about my health incident. I've never received a thank you note from someone at a company before, let alone a handwritten one. You were so helpful to me when we spoke. I felt so much better and confident about next steps after we finished. I hope you have a great day today. Love, Marge. Wow. So you think about, how do we measure results? Not only do the KPIs still get met, there was clear demonstration through the values lens of compassion. The process got changed, and all of UnitedHealth Group call centers started doing different things. And if you think about a call center, the calls coming in are not someone calling to tell you you're doing a great job. And when you're in the position of these consumer advocates, the people calling are confused, hurt, scared, ill. Maybe they just had a loss of a loved one, and they're trying to figure out stuff, and insurance companies aren't exactly known for their clarity on some of these things. Those are difficult conversations. And now the member is writing a thank you note back. Okay, take some courage, as the gentleman mentioned earlier. It takes hard work. So we have the opportunity as trusted leaders to incorporate a lot of the things that we've heard over the last couple days, or not. Many conferences, I've been to a lot of conferences in my career. I've heard a lot of great speakers in my career. I take notes. I try to follow up. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And the question here for all of us is, what are we going to do with it? It may be something that you were inspired from when you heard the award presentation. It could be what you heard from Jerry and talking about because. What's your because? Could be Cassandra, could be any of the speakers, could be any of the discussions, but ultimately it's going to come down to, what are we willing to do? I'm no longer with a company that has 325,000 people. I'm kind of on my own. And I got some advice as I was running this nonprofit and starting to do a little bit of work on my own from a consultant's friend. And he said, Dave, you really need to figure out, you got to figure out two things, just two things. What do you want? And what are you willing to do to get it? Just two things. And I think that's true for all of us today as trusted leaders. Those big, hairy issues we talked about, they're going to be there tomorrow and the next day. unless somebody starts to take a step to do something with them. And we won't solve it all at once, but if we can make progress every day with our families, our teams, our departments, our organizations, starting with ourselves, we do have a chance.
That's it for this week's episode. Be sure to check out trustedleadershow.com for all the show notes and links and information from anything mentioned in today's episode. And we are so excited to have the Trusted Leader Summit coming back next year, November 7th through the 9th, 2023 at the JW Marriott Mall of America here in Minnesota. To find out more information and to register, head to trustedleadersummit.com. And if you haven't already, we would greatly appreciate if you would subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss an episode. But in the meantime, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, stay trusted.